All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another stream. Today is going to be quite a bit different. In this stream, I'm going to watch this video here, which is my speedrun of the Rivulet story percent run. It is currently the world record, although that might change in the future. So I'm going to be basically explaining everything going on in this video. All the strategies that I use, different routes that you can take. But before that, I'm actually going to let's open up the game here. So I want to go over a few things that are important to know about some remix settings, and then I'm going to go into the game and explain some of like the basics of Rivulet's movement. So for the remix settings, you should know that on somewhere in the Rainworld Discord, as well as the speedrun.com page for Rainworld Downpour, there's a list of remix options that are allowed and not allowed for speedruns. So make sure that you have everything correct if you want to submit runs. But the settings that I have are just like my preferences, but some of them are like required that you change. I have a few changed, like I have longer rain timer multiplier. This is not allowed in speedruns, but I'm just doing this for the sake of demonstration, so I have more time. But this setting right here is the most important one. No randomized cycle durations. Rivulet's cycles are significantly shorter than all the other characters, which means that you might randomly get a cycle that's too short for you to do anything, for you to like do the run properly. So this option is allowed for you to enable it, just for this speedrun, the Rivulet story percent run. You can have this on. For any other speedrun, it's not allowed, but it's allowed for this one. I'm going to explain all the other mods that I have enabled another time, but let's get into the game right here. So Rivulet is a very fast character. Part of learning this run is just getting used to the extra speed, because you're going to have to react to things faster. You'll have to just in general be moving around faster, right? So Rivulet, there's a room that I want to go to for this. So for the speedrun, you're just going to want to get used to moving around quickly. So for like any like advanced movement, the most important things for this character is definitely slide pounces. If you want to do a good speedrun, you should really learn how to do these slide pounces, because they're probably like one of the faster methods of moving around. That's also the easiest. You just have to start a slide and jump. It's actually extremely easy to do it as Rivulet compared to other characters. It means that if you get too used to doing this, you might struggle doing slide pounces as other characters, because you'll have to remember to do the normal timing again. But it's much more lenient as Rivulets. You still can mess it up if you jump too early or jump too late, but you've got a lot of time to do it. Now, on top of slide pounces, you can do extended slides. The way you do this is right after starting a slide, you throw an item backwards. And this makes you do the super long slide. And if you time a jump at the very end, an extended slide, you do this pounce, which is very fast, particularly for rooms like this one. You do go through this room in the speedrun. You can go very quickly with this. So make sure you learn how to do the timing of this. It's not like completely necessary. Like you can totally get by just by doing a bunch of slide pounces here. Another important thing that you should know is that after doing a slide pounce, you're going to land in a crouching state. And the fastest way to get out of that is to do a jump and then press up. So when you land, jump, press up, and you can keep running and immediately do another slide pounce. Same for doing this. You'll kind of want to get into this rhythm. That's probably the most important thing for Rivulet's movement. A few other things to know is that your jump goes pretty far on its own, especially with throw boosting. So this gap here, you can just jump across it. You don't even need the throw boost. Although it is probably faster to do a slide pounce. You're comfortable with that, but usually for other slide guys, you would want to do a charge pounce like that, but it's actually not really worth it to ever do that move as Rivulets. The slide, or the charge pounce, it does not really go as far as just doing a regular jump. So don't really do slide pounces. There's a few areas where they may be useful, but I'll mention those when it's important. Another thing to note is that rolling, it's not that fast as Rivulet. You don't roll very fast. compared to just walking. So you pretty much should never roll for movement. What you should do, however, is to do a roll pounce. So the moment you start a roll, you do a jump and you'll do this pounce. And if you have fast rolls, you can actually do that just from a regular standing jump. I did not do this in my run, so you know there may be places where you can improve the time just by making use of fast roll pounces. Because you could just like do this on flat ground, although it's probably not faster than doing slide pounces. Just keep that in mind for this run. Just try not to roll, but do these roll pounces when you can. You can also start them from a slide pounce like this. So I'm just holding the fast roll button, or you can just hold down to start a roll. For any movement, you can look down the bottom left. There's the input displays. You can see what inputs I'm doing if you want to replicate this movement. So doing this, you can also do the quick jump up to start another pounce. Just get used to doing this all the time for Rivulet. And there's not that much other movement that you really need. You can do this jump right here. That's called a extended instant hop. I like to just call them extended jumps or extended hops. And it's basically starting an extended slide but immediately jumping afterwards. The timing is quite difficult. Significantly more difficult than just doing a regular side bounce, and it's easy to mess up and not go as far as possible. I don't recommend using this if you're not familiar with doing extended instant hops already. But they are technically faster than like most other movement you can do. Compared to other characters, it's probably not as important as Rivulets. But you can do it in a few areas, and I will point that out when we get to it. And the last thing that I want to mention is Rivulet's backflips. Go very high, but it's also quite fast. So if there's ever an area where you're on flat ground and you want to gain some height, always start it with a backflip. So you can get that extra little boost up into the air. You can also up throw. This is a remix setting that you have to enable, the extra throw trajectories. You can throw upwards, and it doesn't make you go higher. It also stops you from spinning. You time it right. Just at the start of the jump, it prevents you from spinning around too much, which can be helpful, although I don't know if I even use it in the route. But always try to find areas where you can do backflips to gain some extra height. But anyway, I'm going to now go back to this right here. It wants to switch properly. Alright, so now we get into the run. This is my run. I'm going to be explaining everything about. Yeah, let's just get into it. So there's a lot of things to say about this starting area. You start by falling into this pool of water, and there's actually a few different ways to do this, but your goal is just to eat a bunch of food and then get to the shelter on the other side of, like, a few rooms away from this one. So what I do is I jump out of the water here, eat these fruit up here, and then do a slide bounce across to grab these other fruit. Now jumping out of the water here is actually kind of difficult. So what I do is I don't do any swim boosts. Swim boost is when you press the jump button underwater. It kind of gives you a boost forward in the direction that you're facing. I do a swim boost right below the surface of the water, and I press up to right myself, because you won't go as far if you're in a crouching state, which is what you jump out of the water with. So jump just below the surface of the water, press up, and I think you might have to press jump a second time after that. You can usually get enough height to get all the way up here. If you're not comfortable with that, you can try to jump over here and grab onto this pole. Or you can just go to the side, it's a lot lower down. You can grab it, and then if you grab these fruit, you can grab the fruit later in the room, but this is what I do. I think it's pretty fast. And then for the slide bounce, this is a platform that you can fall down. So if you hold down too long, you'll fall down the platform. So you have to tap down just a little bit to start the slide. So in the input display, I only tap down for a split second. And you can get over to the other platform. And that's pretty much all the food that you need. Now I actually make a little mistake there with the swimming. It can be a bit hard to get used to the swimming in this section. I like to kind of hug the top of the ceiling here to keep myself straight. Because if you can see that trying to go anywhere else kind of makes you wave up and down. Here's an area where you can make use of a backflip like that. Now this area. These tunnels are actually kind of hard to swim through, and especially get out of, because there's these horizontal poles. And if you grab onto the horizontal poles, you'll have to climb up them, and it's a bit slower than just jumping out of the water. But you have to press up to like right yourself from the crouching state. So what I like to do is try to grab onto I actually messed up there. I try to grab onto the vertical poles, and there's no horizontal pole on this last one. These snails are pretty much never a problem. They might get in your way, but just like try not to run into them for too long. It's not much to worry about. And if I ever like don't have anything to say about the movement in a section, then you should probably just like copy what I'm doing, or you know, you can test it out yourself and just do whatever strategy you're familiar with. One tip I'd say for this whole speedrun, and for any speedrun actually, a consistent strategy is better than a fast strategy that's risky. So it's most important that you find a strategy in a room that you are the best at doing consistently. Even if there's another strategy that's slightly faster, but you mess up more often, like don't mess with that unless you're going for a really good time. Just find a strategy that works pretty well and get used to doing that a lot. So these fruit right here are the other fruit that you can grab if you don't want to grab the other fruit in the first room. But you also might want to grab these later in the run. That's just another option. So actually, I make a mistake here. What you want to do is to climb down this pole and then jump onto these platforms here. You can actually jump from this one across, and then you want to grab these fruit. I end up doing that. You want to grab those 2 fruit before getting into the next shelter. Now what I'm going to do in this part of the run is karma caching. If you don't know how to karma cache, all you have to do is, well, first of all, I'm just sleeping in this shelter normally. But after that, you want to starve, and to starve you just hold down in the shelter. If you have at least 1 food pip, you can starve. And then after starving, you want to continue here, and then exit out of the game. There's a short delay on when you can exit out. Here you exit out. And when you continue, you're no longer in a starving state, and your karma has increased. So you just repeat the process where you starve, exit out, and you just repeat that. I'm just going to skip over this. This is kind of an annoying part of the run, having to spend a few minutes karma caching at the start of every attempt. But it just means that you want to get really consistent at the run so that you don't have to restart too often. And you want to karma cache all the way up to max karma. Once you are no longer starving and at max karma, you can continue on. So you eat the fruit here, and I like to, Rivulet has a pearl in their stomach. I like to spit that pearl out, and because there's a decent chance that scavengers will show up in the next room, and this isn't necessary. If you forget about the pearl, it's not a big deal. But if there's a scavenger about to throw a spear at you, and you give them a pearl, and it stops them from throwing the spear at you, then you just saved your run. So this is where you're gonna have to drop the pearl anyway, so it's not that important. But if there's scavengers in the very first run, you might as well, or in the very first room. So what you want to do is grab 2 fruit here. I made another mistake here. What you want to do is do a backflip and then bonk against this wall. Not like underneath what I did, but kind of what it does is it prevents you from spinning around so that you are in a vertical position so that you can grab onto this pearl or the pole from higher up. Now this room is also kind of awful. There's these snails here, which if you push them down, they might like pop when you're down here, which would cause you to drop the fruit that you're carrying, which is not great. There can also be scavengers in this room, which are real painful to deal with. So right here, actually earlier in this room, right here, if you land on this little edge of the platform and then turn around, you can fall into the water in the turnaround state, which is something called turn storage. It's kind of tricky to do, and I don't recommend it if you can't do it consistently. But what it means is that once you climb to the top of this pole, you'll actually do a backflip when you jump. So if you do a backflip, if you have turn storage, you can actually do that backflip and grab the pole up there. But it can be kind of hard to tell if you've actually gotten turn storage or not, but you can tell if you hear the sound effect for turning around. There can also be snails in this room. Just try to like wall jump on the side of the wall that's like opposite of the snail. There can also be a spitter spider, but it's extremely uncommon. I've only seen a handful of spitter spiders in all of these attempts. But if you do see a spitter spider, I'm sorry. Once you enter the gate, you want to eat the fruit here. Just saves a little bit of time to eat fruit in a gate when you can't be moving forward anyway. So actually I messed up there, but you want to do a backflip to enter that pipe a little bit faster. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about routing, and some of the different like strategies you can do. So here's a map. Let's go into Chimney Canopy. So you start down here, and your goal is to go all the way up through the gutter over to here. This gate brings you to the wall, and at the start of the wall, or exterior technically, right up here is where you exit. There is a shelter right here. So it's really hard to get all the way here in a single cycle, but it's possible. And it's the strategy that I use to go from the drainage shelter all the way to the wall in a single cycle so that you can stay in this shelter. However, if you're not confident with your movement, if you're not able to do this consistently, I wouldn't recommend it. It's not worth losing like half of your runs to try to make it to here, because it can vary slightly based on what type of rain you get. You might randomly get a little bit of extra time because the rain takes a bit to become lethal. But if you can't get here consistently, there's a few other strategies. Back in Chimney, there is, first of all, the shelter right here at the start of the gutter. You can take this shelter. It'll give you a little bit of extra time to make it to the wall. But there's a problem with the shelter, because in this area, there's 2 cyan lizards and a few other lizards like white lizards and a blue lizard. That's not as important, but there's basically a white lizard and cyan lizards in this area. They really like to show up. And if you stay in this shelter, there's not going to be much time for the lizards to move around, to wander around that much. So it's much more likely that you'll run into the lizards right here. They like to show up here. So just keep that in mind if you want to try this strategy where you stay in this shelter, that you'll have to deal with the lizards more often. It can be annoying if you want to actually like do a successful run. If you keep dying to the lizards, maybe don't try this, but this is a possible strategy. The other option is to take this shelter up here. And this shelter, you kind of have to take a bit of a detour. Usually you get to this room in the route, and you want to go up and up again to get to the shelter. And then you just go down a few rooms, and you meet right back up with the other strategy. So it does take a little bit of time to get up to the shelter, plus the time that you have to spend to get extra food. Just keep that in mind. If you decide to stay in one of these shelters, that you need to look for more food. There is some fruit right here you can grab. There is some fruit like down here that you can grab before going into the shelter. Or some bat flies, just like in various areas. So you just happen to grab a bat fly, maybe it's worth it to carry on to it before you go into one of these shelters. So if you stay in the shelter, you'll definitely have enough time to make it here, because there's only a few rooms left. However, this is something that I'm actually not completely confident with. Your goal at this point is to go from this part of the wall all the way over here to the entrance of Pebbles. Once you enter the Pebbles region, rain is no longer a problem. You can't die at the rain. I don't know if it's possible to make it this whole distance. It's definitely possible from this shelter, but I don't know if it's possible from the Chimney shelter. If it is, that might be a viable strategy, but I haven't looked into it. But what I do is just to go from the drainage shelter all the way up to the wall in a single cycle. It's rough, but if you get good at the movement, you can get to the point where it's consistent. Anyway, let's continue. Let's continue with this. Another area where I can use a backflip there to get a little bit of extra height. What I like to do in this little room is to do some swim boosts before entering this little tunnel at the top. But not any swim boosts at this point, because you might accidentally swim boost into the ceiling here, and you'll have to spend a bit of time to correct yourself. So, but I guess if you can line it up properly, it's worth doing the swim boost here. Hello, welcome to the stream. I messed that up, but you can do a slide pounce here to get over to this pole faster. So, here's an important part of the run. You can do a plank here, which is what I do. Sends you flying up to the top of this room, and it's definitely the fastest way to do this room. However, I actually don't recommend doing this plank. It is very difficult to do and very inconsistent. I have yet to get to the point where, never in any of my practice was able to do this consistently. And it sucks when you lose half of your runs due to just messing this up multiple times. And if you do the strategy where you try to get to the wall in a single cycle, you can't afford to lose any time by messing up moves like this. And there's tons of ways this can go wrong. You can just not do the plank at all. You can do a plank correctly, but it sends you flying into the wall, which sends yourself for a long time. you might actually get sent flying, but you go too high. If you don't grab onto one of these poles, you can go too high so that you fall down and take fall damage. So there's just so many different ways that you can mess it up. So I don't recommend doing this unless you lost a little bit of time in the previous segment. So if you know that if you made a few mistakes early on, and like I was actually like 5 seconds behind here, plus this mistake right here. So I was like, okay, I'll take the risk. If you're behind and you would reset the run because of all the mistakes, you can try to do this plank here to save yourself the time. And if you mess it up, you know, just restart. And, you know, if you're not going for a good time, you don't have to bother with any of this at all. If you want to do the plank for fun, go ahead and do it. But for a serious run, if you're wasting a lot of attempts by messing up the plank like that, just like you shouldn't do it. Because you don't actually need to do it to get to the wall in a single cycle. I've done that plenty of times. But it's just because I lost a little bit of time early on that I wanted to try it out. So for this whole segment, there's little optimizations that you can do in your movement. Like what I like to do is at the end of every pull to do a little pull boost, because the lag that you normally get from pull boosting is canceled out by grabbing the next pull or by jumping off of it. Doing like wall jumps when you can, because rivulets can't really fast pull climb. It's significantly harder, and I don't do it. But I can do these things where I kind of jump between the pulls to get a little bit of a boost. And here's like the bat flies, and you can also grab these fruit if you want, if you decide to take any of those shelters that I mentioned earlier. So for this next area, this room right here, I'm not holding on to any rocks or spears, but you want to have something to throw for this room, because from this platform, you can do a throw boost to get to the other side. You could also do a slide pounce, although this platform is so small that it's kind of hard to time it properly. You don't have much space. So the safe strategy is to go up top and do a roll pounce up there. But it's recommended that you pick up a rock at some point before this room and use it to throw boost across here. And here's the room. If you decide to go from this room, you can get to that other shelter. So, okay, there's a few things to say about this room. I messed up a slide pounce here, but you should do it there. For this little like bit up here where the centipede is right now, you can do a extended instant hop to kind of jump across this whole room very quickly. If you can't do that, just do a regular slide pounce. It's like still pretty fast. But the centipede was in the way, and I just didn't want to bother with that. Plus, I don't even think I had an item to throw to do the extended jump. So I decided to go through this pipe instead. It's still like decently fast. I did have a rock, but just because the centipede was there. There can also be like other creatures. I do want to talk a little bit about the creatures in this area. You're going to run into a lot of flying centipedes, a lot of blue lizards, white lizards, cyan lizards, and you know that's just kind of you need some experience. You know, just by doing this run a lot, you kind of learn where to expect to find creatures and how to deal with them best. But don't even worry about the flying centipedes. They're pretty much never dangerous. Definitely do worry about the lizards though. So I'm doing something in this room. These are called pole hops. It's when you jump on a pole. Actually, I'm gonna head over to the game right now, because this is only a few rooms away from where I am right now. So here we are. So what I'm doing for this room is pole hops, where you do a jump right when you line up with the pole, right when your feet line up with it, basically. Now, it's actually quite a risky strategy, because if you miss the jump, you're going to fall. You know, you don't want to fall down from here. So what I like to do is this little safety strat. Right after pressing jump, I press up. So that if I mess up the jump, I'll end up grabbing the pole anyway. You can't just hold up. If you're holding up, you just can't do a pole hop. So press jump and immediately press up afterwards to grab the pole in case you miss it. Another thing that I do is when I'm on these vertical poles, you can jump off and immediately do a full hop like that. It's you moving a little bit faster. And if you have a rock, you can't fast pull climb. If you have a rock, you can also give yourself a little bit of speed to do these pull hops a bit faster. Let's get back into the run. Okay. So yeah, I recommend learning how to do those pull hops because you don't lose any time well, you lose time if you mess them up, obviously, but you can't really, there's no harm in doing it. You might as well try it out because you're going to grab onto the pole anyway if you mess it up. This room right here is a great place to make use of extended slides and extended pounces like that. So this is an area where you're definitely going to want to get used to like when you should do extended slides and whatever. This is also where it can start raining. It's quite late in the cycle, so it's going to start raining in this room, especially if you're a bit slower than this. So this is the last point where the rain is dangerous to you. If you get to this tunnel here before it starts raining, you're safe. Congratulations. But if the rain picks up here, you were most likely going to be pushed down to die right there. I suppose if you just like if you don't have any food to stay in the shelter, there is a popcorn plant right here. But I don't like you should get food in other places. And this is where I decided to stay in a shelter. I did mention the possibility of staying in the shelter in the middle of Chimney Canopy and then making it all the way over to Pebbles in a single cycle. I don't know if that's possible, but it might be. But I'd probably recommend this because it doesn't take that much time to get to this shelter, whereas you have to go through quite a long detour to get to the Chimney shelter. So right here, you want to go down. You can go up. You can go up the wall and enter Pebbles from the top. It actually ends up being slower anyway, so I don't recommend learning that. Unless you really don't like Underhang. Since we do have to go through Underhang, we have to use Grapple Worms. So you can go up the wall, although it's quite difficult. You can still do it. You can also do it without even staying in the shelter at all. Although you have to be even faster because you have to get through a few runes before it starts raining here. What's the hardest part of the run? Definitely what I'm about to do right now, the Underhang section. Or maybe just getting to this, if you decide to get to the wall in a single cycle, this can be a pretty hard part because you have to get good at the movement. But once you do get consistent at it, you don't really struggle with it, doing it consistently. But you still can't make mistakes in Underhang very easily. What I do here is I hug this wall, and right as I go underneath it, I tap up to right myself. If you're in a crouching state, you are not going to move as quickly, but I also do a throw boost here. So I happen to have a spear. You want to pick up a rock or spear before you enter the shelter, or to find one along this room here. But doing the throw boost means that you can grab onto this pole. If you don't throw boost, you can grab onto this pole, but if you might take fall damage right here and fall off. So just try to get used to like if you want to throw boost or not, so that you can line up to grab either of these poles. Another place where you can make use of extended slides. If you do a extended slide pounce right here, it perfectly lines you up to go into this pipe. But it varies with your timing, so make sure to practice that part. Here's where you grab a grapple worm. It might randomly be in like down here in the corner or up here, so just make sure to like get used to its locations. Okay, now we get into Underhang. I want to talk about this a whole lot. So this is probably the hardest part of the run. And I think it's definitely worth practicing this part alone a whole lot. Because it sucks if you be like, because it's quite hard to get here in the first place. You have to get past quite a lot of lizards in Chimney Canopy and the scavengers that might show up in Drainage System. But it sucks to get past all that and then to lose to this part of the run. So if anything, you want to practice this a whole lot so that you never make a mistake here. And so you could just stay in that shelter in the wall and just repeat this segment over and over again. As for the grapple movements, you want to try to find a consistent strategy. Don't just like wing it, just like, oh, I'll just play safe. I won't fall down. Don't do that. Just learn like where should you jump from and where should you grapple, and memorize exactly where you're going to do everything, and then follow that strategy every time. So you could just look at what I'm doing and copy what I'm doing. That's totally fine. Or if you want, you can make little adjustments because there's also a lot to optimize about this part of the run. You could use grapple worms to go quite fast if you optimize the movement, but it's probably worth playing it a bit safe if you're not going for a crazy time. So I actually make a mistake here. I wanted to jump off of this little platform right here, but I ended up falling down. But I reacted fast enough to recover. So you're also going to want to practice this enough just for the experience of like knowing if you make a mistake, what to do to correct it. So I was able to react quite quickly. And right here is where I start doing my memorized movement again. This could be quite annoying to get past. My strategy is to jump right there, grapple onto this platform, and then grab this pole. You can also just grapple the block below that and swing all the way up here. For this bit, you want to do a charge pounce. It's actually a useful area to use it because it goes quite low. You don't hit this thing on the ceiling. You can also drop down to this platform and just do a regular jump across. But want to be quite fast or else the DLO will get you. You can do a backflip right here. I meant to do a wall jump right there to grab onto the pole, but grapple worm works fine if you accidentally do that. This proto DLL that's hanging from the ceiling, you just slide under it. Now for this room, there's a DLL, and I decided to go underneath it. Don't do this. If you're able to, just go above. You know, it takes me quite a while to get up, and you might die to these DLLs down here. But there is probably going to be a DLL in this room. It might have fallen off. Sometimes you don't see the DLO, but it might be in this part of the room. It might be under here. It might be further to the left. Just like, this is why practicing this part is so important too, because you can get familiar with where this DLL is most likely to be and what you can do to avoid it. Because you know, if he's right here, it might seem like there's no way to go to get past him, but you can swing underneath. So, you know, it's worth practicing that a little bit. Right here is where you want to drop the grapple worm. It's no longer useful. This must have taken a lot of attempts. Yeah, more than 200. Make sure that you grab these slime molds right here, because you need to stay at a shelter later. This is an area that's worth memorizing the movement of, specifically, because there's these little proto DLLs here and there. And since they're off screen and you're moving quite quickly, it'd be hard to react. If you do a slide pounce, like a bit too late, you might get grabbed by the ones on the ceiling. And there's a few more that's a bit more dangerous in the next room. Remember to grab the fruit right here, because you don't have quite enough food to shelter. So yeah, if you don't know what you're doing, you might end up dying to those DLLs on the ceiling. So make sure that you memorize a strategy that consistently gets you past those. So you have to go through the entirety of the rot, then to go through the wall. The thing is that we're going for the Rarefaction cell. You know, we don't care about pebbles themselves. We just need to grab the Rarefaction cells. It is actually faster to grab the Rarefaction cell when coming from below. There's also some DLLs that are quite annoying that you might show up if you go from above. This jump right here, you need to tap jump for only a little bit. If you jump too high, you'll go into this pipe up here, or you'll end up going into this pipe backwards. So just do a small jump right there. Now, in this part, this is where there are gravity cycles. So there is low gravity, or no gravity, or normal gravity, and it cycles between them at random intervals, which means that you need to be able to get through every single room here, whether it's normal gravity or no gravity at all. So you need to practice. This is another area that you should practice a whole lot. You can stay in the shelter at the start of this region too to practice it a whole lot. Just make sure to restart before you grab the Rarefaction cell, or before you stay in another shelter. But you just need to get familiar with, like, if this room is normal gravity, what can I do? And if the room is zero gravity, what should I do? This is actually messed up in this section a little bit. There's a tunnel right here that's obscured by the foreground. If it's zero gravity, you can just jump up from the bottom pole, or from the bottom tunnel. You can make it up, but I kind of messed up here. But then gravity switches and it's all right. And you can just jump across like this if it's zero gravity. If it's normal gravity, you can do a backflip and grab onto this pole, or this like vine thing. You can also get turn storage on this vertical pole and then do a backflip up to this pole. It's a little bit faster, but it's really hard to do. And if you take too long setting it up, then this DLL down here will grab you. This room is a lot easier to navigate in normal gravity, but you can still float across and grab these vines in low gravity. This room is unchanged in either state. No, I grab a neuron right here. I don't have enough food to shelter, at least I don't think I do. But I like eating a neuron here because it makes a later part in the run easier. And if you're waiting for the gravity to change, then you might as well take that time to eat the neuron. You don't really lose any time by doing that. And you're most likely going to find a neuron at some point here. So this guy likes to reach one of his tentacles down here. It's probably not too dangerous, although, I mean, be careful. Also make sure that you know how to do this in low gravity. Now, okay, I do some interesting movement here where I slide into there's a small ledge I can stand on, and I slide into the wall and do a wall pounce. And this gets me up here. This is probably where, the one part of the run where wall pounces are really useful. So I recommend having wall pounces on just for this, because if it's normal gravity, it's really hard to get through this area in normal gravity. But what I do right here is I do a bunch of wall pounces between the walls and I get up here. If it's low gravity, then you're just going to want to line up with one of these poles and jump up, and then you can grab the vine up here to go to the side. You can also go into this other pipe. It's also a viable part. That's like a viable option, but I don't recommend it because it makes some of the low gravity movement harder. But also, like, you definitely don't need to do this wall pounce movement. If you don't like wall pounces, you don't need to turn it on. Although it does save time in this scenario, you can still get there just by waiting for the gravity to change. Gravity changing here doesn't really matter when you're underwater. Oh, another thing that's important to know. When you come out of a pipe or a tunnel, you are perfectly lined up straight. So you can do a bunch of swim boosts without being sent in a random direction. If you aren't perfectly aligned like that, Rivulet likes to swim in random directions, honestly. It's hard to control, but if you come out of a pipe or a tunnel, it's lined up. For this room, you can do these wall jumps that I did if it's normal gravity. If it's low gravity, you want to like jump off of the wall down here to try to get up here. This is why I prefer to take this route. If you do the other route, you come out of this pipe and you have to like make this turn in low gravity sometimes, and that's quite hard to do. And this room is quite annoying depending on if the gravity is low or normal. The gravity just switched right here, so I did a jump to get up, and I did a throw boost to correct my movement here. If it stays normal gravity, you can climb up to this pole, climb up here, and then get up to this little platform up here above the red like neuron thing. Get above that and then do a charge pounce into this wall and hug the wall until you slide into this pipe. Or if it takes a little bit longer for the gravity change, you can grab onto the pole down there and then jump diagonally up here once the gravity is low. This movement is kind of awkward in low gravity, but it's worth getting used to. I didn't mean to do a wall pounce there, but it still kind of worked out. I normally just jump up. So for this area, there's the Rarefaction cell coming up in a few rooms. Also, that's where you want to line up to get through these areas in low gravity. But we want to grab the Rarefaction cell. So what I like to do is hang out on this pole right here, and then jump up once it becomes normal gravity. What you have to do to enter this room is to climb up to the very top of the pole, then do a jump, and at the very top of your jump, hold left to get into the room, and you can usually make it. If it is low gravity in this room, it's still possible to make it into the Rarefaction cell room. It's just quite hard. What I like to do is, well, I actually don't like doing it at all, but you can move to the left into this wall and then do a wall jump, and because the gravity effect will cause you to get pulled around. And once you reach this area, if you have an item, you can throw boost to kind of push yourself into the pipe, although it's not consistent at all, and you know, it's kind of messy. I don't recommend doing that. Just wait for the gravity to become normal and then do this strategy. But Pebbles is thinking watching this through the overseers. What is this slug doing? Okay, so now we have the Rarefaction cell. This is an interesting part of the run because, you know, you basically need to learn when to activate it, when it is most useful. But also, like, when you activate it depends on how fast you move. So depending on your skill level, you're going to want to adjust your timing of the cell. But I'll point out, like, when you should use it. So I make a small mistake here. What I want to do is activate the cell before entering this pipe. And like, what you want to do normally is just to activate the cell anywhere here, because you're going to be swimming a lot and you move quite quickly underwater when you have the cell activated. But I know that I move quite fast. You know, I've practiced it a bit. I know that I can do this section quickly. So I actually want to activate the cell a little bit earlier. And that means that it will be active the next time that I want to use it a little bit sooner. So the faster you get, the earlier you're going to want to use the cell, just so that you have it activated, or it's ready to use the next time you want to, the next time it's useful. And this is about where it should turn off. You can just drop down this room and grab onto the poles here. And right about, well, not here. Right about here is where you're going to want to activate the cell next, because there's quite a bit of underwater movement. You can see that just now the cell came back online to be usable. So because I used it a little bit earlier than I had to last time, I could use it right there. And you mostly want to use it here because of some of the underwater movement right here, as well as this jump is super easy to make with the cell on. If the cell turns off before this, you could just do a backflip to make it up here. Be careful with the CLL. They might grab you if you make too much noise, but it's worth it going down this middle platform all the way down here, and you can do some tunnel boosts to move here quickly. And you need to stay in the shelter. I think it is currently raining, so if you just leave pebbles, you will die. Or actually, you might not even be able to get through the gates. You can do a boost out of this pipe, and then a boost right before exiting the tunnel, which gives you enough momentum to kind of jump across these platforms quite quickly. This is another time where I've memorized exactly where I want to slide and do slide pounces and such. So I do a slide and then a slide pounce just to get the spacing correctly. You might want to eat these food, and I guess I'll have to explain this a bit later, because our goal from here is to get into Submerged Superstructure, right? That's the next place that we're going to. However, it's quite far away, and the cycle is longer, but this is also a longer distance that you have to travel. So if you're not fast enough, I recommend testing this out, see if you can make it in a single cycle. If you're not fast enough, you want to stay in a shelter around the entrance of Submerged Superstructure, which means that you'll want to grab food before that point. So I like to grab, or what I did before this new strategy is I would eat this food right here, so I didn't have to worry about it later. But if you think you can do it in a single cycle, and you know that you can do it by testing it out, then you don't need to eat this food. So this is another area I activate the cell early, because I know that I want to have it ready at a specific time, but you're going to want to activate it right here for this jump. Now, for this room, you can jump across this gap up here. It's a little bit faster. However, if you jump too high, you'll get got by these DLLs. So you want to just tap jump very lightly, and also get a bit of coyote time, which means walking off the platform before jumping, which means that it'll be a little bit lower. But it's kind of a risky strategy. It's a lot safer just to fall down here, or I guess you could come up with some other strategy that goes along the bottom of this room. There's a lot that could be changed about underhang, and it's honestly there's an area where there can be a lot of optimizations made. So if you want to look into possible new strategies, this is an area where that's definitely possible. But the reason I activate the Rarefaction cell early is so that it would turn off here. If the Rarefaction cell is on, it might kind of fling you into these proto-DLLs up there. I should point out that the consistent way for me to grab onto these vines is to stand right here, and then immediately jump, hold to up and to the right. You'll always grab onto this. Be careful in this area. It's very easy to mess that up. I've died here a few times. You can immediately do a roll right there. This is another area you can technically do a slide bounce right here, but it's kind of risky because you might miss these poles and just fall to your death. This is an area where you probably want to prioritize being careful, being fast. So you could do a slide bounce there, but I don't do that yet. For this area, you really want to memorize like when you want to jump off the platforms or when you want to jump off the poles, because the longer that you hesitate to like figure out what you want to do, it's going to take a bit of time. So here's a DLL right here. This is a very annoying DLL because they could be pretty much anywhere in this side of the room. They might be like right where I am right now, right below this platform, or anywhere to the right of this. The moment you know where the DLL is, you should come up with a plan to get around it. That might mean going through these pipes. That might be jumping over it. But I always recommend activating the Rarefaction cell here because this movement is quite slow if you have to go through the pipes to navigate this room. If the DLL is right here, you can go to this platform down here and do a charge bounce across with the Rarefaction cell on. You'll make that gap. But hopefully you don't have to do that because it does take a bit of time to set that up. And for these jumps, make sure not to jump too high or else you'll hit the DLLs on the ceiling. You can actually, the moment you exit this pipe, you can do a slide to immediately get into that tunnel. But I messed that up here. Now, in this room, there's a possible strategy of throwing the Rarefaction cell across the room, picking up a rock, and then doing an extended slide after it. I think that might be faster, but it's hard to know exactly where you're going to catch the Rarefaction cell and if there's a rock there to do a slide. And if you mess it up, you're definitely going to lose time. Oh, another thing, in this room, you could like try to boost out of this tunnel here to fall faster, although you'll end up taking fall damage right here and you might drop the cell. So I like to don't do anything in this tunnel, just drop down normally and try to do a roll at the bottom and it'll be safe. Now, okay, for these rooms in underhang or the leg, there's a strategy where you can line yourself up right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Grab the 4th pole that you come across. I kind of count in my head 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's exactly where you want to grab onto the pole to climb up. And for all of these rooms in the leg, there's probably like 1 or 2 DLLs per room. So, sometimes you want to... There's technically faster strategies, I think, because I like to hug this wall right here and go through these tunnels, which is pretty fast on its own, but there might be faster strategies that involve not going through the tunnels, just falling down normally, but there could be DLLs anywhere in this room, so that might involve running directly into a DLL. I kind of got lucky here that I didn't get grabbed, but that's a possibility. So actually, yeah, I made a bit of a mistake here. I could have just fallen down here, but since I had never done that before, I didn't know if I was going to fall safely. I might have taken fall damage, so I decided to take the safe strategy that I was familiar with and go through this tunnel. But, maybe it's worth learning these rooms in both ways, going through the tunnels and just falling through the sides of them, because that's probably faster if you know where the DLLs are and you know that you can do it safely. So here's another room where you can fall all the way down. I like to line myself up right here, and you don't even need to count the pulls this time. Because if you line yourself, you'll always grab this pole that extends further out than the other poles. You just need to hold up to make sure that you grab it. Right here, what I do is I drop down from this pole. I accidentally grab it a second time, so try not to do that. But slide along this wall and tap up the moment you start moving to the side. If you're in a crouching state, you won't move fast enough. So tap up right there to right yourself. But the safer strategy is just to climb above this and go through these tunnels. It's slower, but it's a lot safer. That depends on what your goal is for the speedrun. If you want to go for those risky strategies. This is a funny moment. There's a DLL right here. I feel like the longer that I spent in this area, the more likely the DLL would just find me and grab me, so I decided to just run by as fast as possible. There's also a consistent strategy here where you line yourself to grab this pole. That involves doing a roll pounce on this platform right here, or maybe I just roll off normally. I kind of forget. But get used to a strategy here that lets you consistently grab this pole here, so you don't take fall damage. You might end up dropping the cell in. It could land in somewhere you can't retrieve it. So now we get into memory crypts. Make sure to roll a little bit here on the top of that block so that you get far enough to go into that pipe. For this room, you can use a Rarefaction cell here. If you want, you can activate it and do a slide bounce across this whole room. But I don't actually know if that's too much faster, and you kind of want to have the Rarefaction cell later. So I just do regular slide bounce. And roll bounce whenever I land on the ground. There's some DLLs here, or proto DLLs, but I don't think they're actually dangerous. I've never died to them, even if I went quite close to the ground. But if you're scared of them, just like land normally and do a regular jump. You're probably going to find. I do a slide bounce right here. It's actually quite a difficult timing for some reason. So practice this jump specifically because it's the fastest way to get past all these proto DLLs. There's a few parts in this area where there's a tunnel leading into a pipe just beneath the water. And it can actually be quite difficult to line yourself to enter these pipes. I might even mess it up a few times in this run. You're going to want to make sure that you are try to like enter or go underneath the water just a bit before the tunnel, so that you go kind of in an arc into it. Okay, here's a funny strategy. It might be possible to climb up to the right side here and jump down and do a plunk in this pool of water, or maybe a pool of water in a different room, to send yourself flying across this entire room. I tried that strategy and I could never do it consistently. It's very hard to get the plunk in the first place, but actually sending you in the correct direction. But if anyone wants to go for a world record, this might be a strategy worth looking into. Although, I don't know. Right here, I should do a slide bounce. I don't know why I didn't. But you should do a slide bounce here, it's faster. But there's orange scissors in this room. And their positions are kind of random. They might be up here, they might be further to the left. They could be anywhere. If they're on this platform that I'm standing on right now, I think I'd recommend doing a backflip to grab onto the poles up here to jump over them. If the orange lizards are anywhere else, you can do a slide bounce and then jump across here. Once you're up here, if you don't have fast rolls, you have to wait a bit on your jump so you can start a roll bounce here. If you have fast rolls, it's probably a lot easier to do. This is the other room I'm talking about. This pool of water here. You might be able to do a plank here, although I don't know if that's possible. So here, this is a quite difficult strategy actually. You want to activate the Rarefaction cell right here and do a backflip. If you jump too high, you'll actually go above the screen. It'll be hard to see where you are. But if you don't jump high enough, you won't reach these platforms. So you need to hold jump for a specific amount of time. You can learn the timing and kind of do it consistently, but it's hard. Practice this though. If there's other ways to get up to this platform that's more consistent, you can look into that and see if there's a strategy that works out. But you want to get up to this platform right here and do a slide bounce. You just want to hold forward and then grab onto this pole right here. There's a chance that this DLL has a tentacle extended to grab onto this pole, in which case you're immediately going to get grabbed by it and you're going to die. Hope that doesn't happen. I have died to that before, but you're going to want to climb up to the top of this pole and try to like hold forward for a little bit before jumping to get a bit of speed. If you don't get enough speed, you can jump on the DLL. It's possible. You won't die because it doesn't have any tentacles up here that can grab you. So if you're not fast enough, you can jump on the DLL, although I made it fast enough. You can see it, how close it is. Like I almost got grabbed by that tentacle. You don't want to do a roll bounce the moment you land and you can make it across this. If the Rarefaction cell turns off before this and you can't do a roll pounce above it, don't try to jump over these DLLs. You're probably going to die. Just go under the tunnel right here. A little bit slower, but much safer. So this room is quite annoying because there's a lot of orange lizards in this room. And they might be like as far as to the right as this. So these jumps are stressing you out. Yeah, it's difficult. You need to this is another area that you should practice to get used to the timing of everything. So there's orange lizards in this room. They might show up and be in this area right here, in which case it's quite hard to avoid them. But if the orange lizards are here, I like to stand right about here. Oops. I want to show the position correctly. Right about here. And you can do activate the Rarefaction cell. It does take a little bit for it to come online, but activate the Rarefaction cell, do a backflip, and just hold forward. And you'll land about on the top of the orb here. I got super lucky, actually, that all the orange lizards were over here. But understand that there's a possibility that they'll be right here when you're trying to climb up the orb. But your goal is to get up to the top of this, activate the Rarefaction cell, and then do a backflip. And just hold forward. And then do, like, spam jump at some point, so that you do a jump the moment you land on this platform. The thing is, you pretty much need the Rarefaction cell on to get past all these proto DLLs up here. Maybe there's some, like, jank, like, slide bounce tech that you can do to get past this, but going underneath through the tunnels down here is significantly slower. So you're always going to want to use the Rarefaction cell here and using it to do the backflip earlier in this room. Like, might as well, right? While the rarefaction cell is on. And you can go into this tunnel. So this pipe is actually quite hard to enter. You're going to want to hold down before you think that you're going to, before you think you need to. So what I like to do in this area is to activate the rarefaction cell right here. Do slide bounces to get across. Get into this pipe, then do another slide bounce right here. And it pretty much perfectly lines you up to get into this pipe. I just want you can swim a bit. It's actually an alternate strategy here. There's a pipe up here, a secret pipe. Actually, let me get that open on the map. Here we are, Shaded Citadel. Where are we? So right here, this is the room where there's a kelp. Kelp right here. You enter from here. There's a secret tunnel up here. It leads into this room, which then leads up here. You go from here, and then this is the room that both the routes converge into. So if you take the other route, you get to this room. You move forward. If you take the other route, this other route might be faster, although this room is kind of jank. Like, these walls are all over the place. You have to learn how to navigate this. I prefer taking the other strategy, which you'll see right here. There's also the potential to optimize this. If you do a slide pounce a little bit later than I did, hit this wall, you can do a wall pounce to send yourself flying up higher into this, so we can grab the pole from higher. And there's a few places where you can do that in these few rooms, like right here. You can do a wall pounce right here to go up here faster, although, you know, the timing is quite difficult, and that depends on also if you want to have wall pounces enabled. So this room is full of spiders. This is why I ate the neuron fly earlier in Pebbles. I recommend eating the neuron fly. If you want to be extra safe, you can grab a flashbang in memory crypts. Bring that with you and keep it in your stomach, and then spit it out to throw it at these spiders here. But, you know, usually if you have the neuron light and you move fast enough, they're not going to be dangerous at all. But it's also nice to have the neuron light just to see where you're going. And it really means that you don't have to worry about the spiders at all. So this area is actually kind of annoying. You can do a pounce, charge pounce right here. What I like to do is like walk off the ledge there, slow down a little bit to land on this ball, and then jump up to this pole. That's the most consistent strategy that I found for that. So for this area, if you line up right here, activate the rarefaction cell and do a slide bounce, you can do a roll pounce on that platform to land right here. It's quite hard to activate or to do a roll pounce on that once you land there. But eventually you're going to want to throw the rarefaction cell and eat this karma flower. That's important for later. So, okay, I actually didn't do it in this room, but it might be worth it to throw the rarefaction cell here, because you actually move quite slowly with it activated, because you keep, hey, if you jump, you'll just hit the ceiling. So it may be worth it to throw the rarefaction cell across this room and do a slide pounce to catch up to it. I'll have to look into that strategy. And now you enter Shoreline. So I'm going to be honest. Shoreline is probably the worst part of the run for me. It's not the hardest part. It's actually quite easy. There's not really anything that's dangerous to you. Although some of the underwater movement is quite difficult, and it's kind of hard to control Rivulet sometimes. So if you're looking on improving the run, you know, Shoreline is one place to look into. There's a lot of optimizations to be made. There's this thing that you can do here. It's kind of similar to a plunk, actually. And I think it's a similar mechanic. If you land into the water from a great enough height, you can do a swim pounce, or a swim boost. Swim pounce? You can do a swim boost, and it gives you this massive boost of speed. And I actually messed up entering the pipe here. This is probably why this movement is so hard for me. It's quite hard to navigate precisely into these pipes when you're underwater. And I like actually make a mistake here. I dropped the Rarefaction cell. If you're holding down, if you're moving down to try to enter the water, and you want to activate the Rarefaction cell at the same time, you might drop it. I actually don't know what causes that, like what the timing is exactly for dropping the Rarefaction cell, but it happens on accident sometimes. So probably worth looking into what causes you to drop the cell and trying to avoid that purposefully. So I lost a bit of time going back to grab the Rarefaction cell. But you do want to activate it here because there's quite a lot of underwater tunnels that you can swim through a lot faster with the cell enabled. Like right here. And if I didn't make a mistake, it would be active right here, so I could swim across this faster, and I would jump up faster. Now this area is quite annoying because the jetfish are here, and they like to bully you. So I think they actually slow me down a bit. Yeah. I like to just jump across the surface of the water here. It might be worth it to try to swim underneath, or to wait a little bit on the activation of the Rarefaction cell to use it here. Because if you have the Rarefaction cell enabled, you can just jump up to this pipe, but I have to go through this little bit right here. But I don't really like to have the Rarefaction cell enabled because it makes you fall slower through this room. Actually messed up here. You want to line yourself perfectly with the center of this room so you can fall into the water and not take fall damage. I messed that up, of course. When entering this room, I like to wait a little bit and then activate the Rarefaction cell right here to swim through the rest of it quite quickly. There is an aquapede in this room. I don't even know if I see it. Yeah, I don't even see the aquapede, but it might show up anywhere in this room. But this route that I take through these tunnels specifically, I don't usually see the aquapede in here. Usually the aquapede is like further to the right a little bit. It's usually distracted by the jetfish. But it's kind of hard to avoid it. If you see that it's in the next tunnel, don't go that way. But most of the time, the aquapede isn't a problem. It's over here to the side, so just hope that's not a problem for you guys. And so this area, it might be worth it to try to line up the Rarefaction cell timing so that you swim through this a little bit faster, but I actually don't think that's worth it because it means that you move through this area slower. This is actually somewhere where I tried the throwing Rarefaction cell strategy, but I didn't pick up any rocks, and I don't think it really gained or lost any time for me. So right here, here's a shelter that you can take. There's also a shelter in the next room that you can take. Because getting from pebbles all the way to submerged superstructure in a single cycle, it's quite difficult. So if you're not able to do that, this shelter or the next shelter are options for you. And then from here, you can get to the end of the game. So I do a slide bounce right here. And if you want, you can go up into this shelter, but I don't do that. For this area right here, I think there might be something that you can do that's faster here. I like to try to hug the wall and grab onto this pole. It's not consistent. You kind of have to just memorize where it is to line yourself up. An alternative option is to just land on this platform up here and then do a roll pounce or just regular roll to stop yourself from taking fall damage. If you take fall damage, it's quite bad because you drop the Rarefaction cell and you have to go pick it up again, and it might get sent like anywhere in this room. This is another place where I like to activate the Rarefaction cell. I think it's worth it because you start swimming a whole lot here. There's a kelp right here. This monster kelp is very bad. It's totally ready to grab you the moment you swim by, even if you think you're moving quite quickly. So I go quite a ways around it to try to avoid it. And something that I like to do in these little sections here is to make use of swim boost to make sharp turns. So right here, I have to turn quite sharply to get into this tunnel, but I do a swim boost right here to catch up. Now, something to know about this room, there are a lot of jetfish. There's two jetfish right here. You can't, if you're trying to get past a jetfish, you can't push it out of the way. You're just gonna get stuck. So wait for the jetfish to pass and then move forward. It really sucks if you get stuck in front of a jetfish here. Also, some important things to know about this room. It's not worth it to do tunnel boosts, so don't jump here, but it is worth to do pipe boosts. So the moment you exit this pipe, boost, and maybe it works here, I don't actually know. And you may think it's worth it to try to do a tunnel boost to enter this pipe, but it actually slows you down, so just hold up. This room is quite annoying. There's a bunch of jetfish and they like to try to bully you, so just try to get out of here as fast as possible. Now this is something that I actually haven't tested. It might be worth it to activate the Rarefaction cell right here. But I don't do that for another reason. There's a jellyfish right here. This jellyfish is kind of hard to predict, but I always recommend going to the left of it. Don't go to the right of it because that's where all of its tentacles are. And even if you think that you can swim fast enough to avoid getting grabbed, you're probably going to get grabbed anyway. And if you get shocked, it'll really slow you down because you'll drop the Rarefaction cell and you'll be stunned. You might almost drown. Just go to the left and avoid the jellyfish. Be careful in this area. I messed up entering this tunnel right here. My underwater movement isn't the greatest. Now, right here, you want to go into this pipe up here. And there's a strategy to do it consistently. I think it's faster to do a backflip, although the backflip I feel is inconsistent. So the strategy that I do that I find to be consistent is to activate the Rarefaction cell, climb up to the top of the pool and jump once you're at the top. Wall jump up this wall, and then this wall. Like just do normal wall jumps, wall jump, and then hold up after the second wall jump. Just hold up, don't hold any other buttons, and you'll move into that pipe automatically. So this area you actually want to be a little bit careful. There's some jellyfish in this room, and if you try to swim along the bottom here, it's fast with the Rarefaction cell on, which is why I think that it might be worth it to activate it earlier, before the big jellyfish. But if you swim under this room, you might get caught by the small jellyfish, which will also shock you and slow you down. So I'd like to jump over them, so it might be worth it to activate the Rarefaction cell earlier. But also, if you're fast enough, you can make use of the underwater movement in this little room right here. So, you know, trade-offs. So I'll have to like test this a whole lot to see what exactly the fastest strategy. This like little diagonal tunnel right here, it's actually quite hard to navigate without bumping into the walls. So if you want, you could just go above it. So for the next few rooms, there's a chance that an eel lizard will show up. Also, you want to activate the Rarefaction cell right here to swim through this whole bit a lot faster. But an eel lizard can show up at any point here, and just hope that it doesn't. Honestly, if it shows up right here, you're dead. You know, you can't move through these tunnels fast enough. But make sure they don't get stuck right here. It's actually can be quite difficult. But like, make sure that you're immediately holding to the left to enter this tunnel, because if you get stuck, you might enter the thing backwards, and it's kind of hard to see which direction you're facing. So just always be careful to be facing the right direction when you're moving through these tunnels. I actually accidentally did a wall pounce there, so another reason you might not want to have them enabled, even though I think they do save you time. So you can make use of swim boost here, because you know swim boosts make you go a lot faster, but they drain a lot of your breath. But you get an air pocket right here, so it's worth doing swim boost. But here is quite a long swimming section, so you're going to want to avoid swim boosts when possible to save as much breath as possible. And also activate the Rarefaction cell right here. You're going to be swimming a lot. The eel lizard can also show up here. I think maybe an aquapede too. So good luck with those, but you have a lot of space to maneuver around them if they do get in the way. So here you actually swim quite slowly. I looked at my breath meter here, and I kind of know what to expect my breath meter to look like. So I knew that I had a little bit of extra leniency, so I could do a swim boost here, but I'd avoid it for the most part. I really don't think it's worth it to do a lot of swim boosts here. You can see how close it is. Also, if it's raining, when you enter this room, you will instantly die. So, you know, be fast. Or just stay in one of the shelters at the start of this region. So, okay, so for this little bit, you're going to see me do a little bit of a ritual. Technically, the moment you activate the cell, you can exit out of the game right now. And I exit out. You see me do a bunch of like random stuff here. The thing is, the game might crash. Well, it doesn't really crash, but when you load it up, I do right here, it might have an infinite loading screen. So with this loading thing in the bottom right, it just stays, or the bottom left, it just stays there forever, and the game never opens. If that happens, I'm sorry. I don't know why that happens. I would love if someone tried to figure out why that happens, so that we could try to do something to avoid it, or if it was just patched. But the game might crash here, and it's quite an annoying part of the run, unfortunately. That the fate of your run is just like a roll of the dice, you know. It might just like end right here. And you think that, you know, it's not a big deal because you can just continue playing, even if like exit out, continue playing, but you actually lose a karma level. This is the reason that we got the karma flower earlier and shaded. You want a karma flower so that you stay at max karma level. because this does count as like dying, exiting out right here. But it does skip the whole cutscene after activating the Rarefaction cells, so it saves time. No, they need to see in the speedrun community for that. For the game crashing, normally in speedruns, if the game crashes, like you can just continue with the run. I don't think there's any problem with that. The problem is that you lose your karma level here, and you have to like stay in a shelter to save that time later. This is also where I start messing up moving to a lot more, because you know I'm at the end of a like pretty good splits of the speedruns, so I was kind of nervous at the end of a run. That's pretty normal for these speedruns. But, you know, you'll see that I'm trying to do a lot of movement here, like slide pounces and whatever. So I may mess it up. Right here, I messed this up. I don't actually know what the timing is exactly for this, but you could do a wall pounce right here to go up quite quickly, but I messed it up. It's not a big deal if you don't do that. You could probably do a slide. Oh, this is also an area where you can make use of fast rolls. Because remember, where am I right now? Remember that if you have fast rolls enabled, or if you use a controller, you can start rolls quite easily just from doing like a regular jump, right? So just doing this a whole lot whenever you're able to. You get pounce the moment you hit the ground. This is a room where you could probably make use of that, or you can just do a slide pounce along that platform. I like to line myself up right here to do a slide pounce, so you can immediately do a roll pounce to get across this area quickly. This blue lizard is probably one of the few dangerous things in this whole area, but it's usually not a problem. Pick up some rocks and throw it at him if he gets in the way. There is a platform right here, so you're going to want to hold down to get past the platform. Right here, what we're going to want to do is to climb up this pole. I kind of mess it up. Climb up the pole, do a wall jump, and then jump across the top of these platforms here. If you want, you can throw a boost to make it across these gaps a little easier. This is definitely the most consistent way that I've found to do it. There's a chance that a white lizard might show up in any of these next few rooms. Be careful about that. I messed up a slide pounce there, unfortunately. But this is a good place to do a slide pounce. Or an extended slide. That might also work. What I like to do for this area is kind of count in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4 slide pounce. I do a slide pounce here. I gotta move to the side to check where the Samiros vulture is. Yeah, Samiros vultures can show up in this area. It's kind of awful. So just hope that they don't get in the way, because if they do, then your run is kind of just over. But luckily, he was just hanging out there, so just watch out for the Samiros vultures. Also, scavengers can show up in this area. So I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, do a slide pounce. And actually get a lucky boost out of the water there. There's another place you can do a slide pounce. And right here, you can also, every place I do a slide pounce here, you can probably also do an extended instant hop, which is probably faster, but you know, you don't really want to mess that up at the very end of a run. You can drop down from that pole and do a slide pounce immediately. And here we are. So in this area, there's a kind of slight optimization that you can make here. I like to do a throw boost here to line myself up with that pole. You want to do a bunch of slide pounces along the floor here, but there's these poles that also lie along the floor. It's actually possible to do a pole hop when you're in the slide pounce position, which I don't do that properly anytime here. I'm kind of making a lot of mistakes at this point in the run, but if you time it properly and you learn this route consistently, you can do a pole hop after a slide pounce, and it sends you quite quickly across this room. And for these next few rooms, I kind of have these areas where I like to line myself up. So I jump into this wall right here, because if you kind of hug this wall, but immediately fall down, you can make it all the way across this room without bumping into anything. And then I also have a strategy. I go over here, fall all the way down into the water, I think you can also use the other side, line up with this hole right here. There's a little bit of weaving that you have to do through that. And once you enter this pipe, it's time, and the run is over. At this point, you don't really need to watch this cutscene if you don't want to. You can just exit out right here. But that's the run. Now, there's a few other things that I want to mention first. Mostly how I practice this run. So, I can point out that Ragnarok is a difficult game. Ragnarok is really difficult. And if you want to speedrun it, expect to restart a lot, to die to stupid things a lot. This is like my 268th attempt. Although, that's kind of it's not quite an accurate measure of how many attempts I've spent, because like a good half of those probably I died in like drainage system at the very start of the run. Which, I mean, that's annoying that you might lose a run at the very beginning so often. But something that actually helped out a lot, I'm going to head back to the game here. So if we go into the remix options, I have a bunch of mods enabled. And all of these mods that I have enabled right now, except for input display, I guess that's not the most important, but all of these mods, game journalist, this also isn't necessary, but it does help with the run if you want to use it. Dev tools and Beastmaster, mostly these three mods right here. Now, what do these all do? First of all, dev tools. First of all, I think the most important thing that dev tools does is it lets you teleport. So let's hop into the game. I'll kind of showcase what I use dev tools for when practicing. You have to press O on your keyboard to activate it, and then you can do a bunch of things. You can press S to speed up time. It makes dealing with the shelter openings a bit faster. You can press Q to give yourself food, which means that you can raise your karma level quite easily by doing this. Speed up time. Give yourself food. Just repeat to get your karma up if you want to like get into a region quickly. But the most important thing that DevTools does, honestly, is the teleport. So if you press V on your keyboard, you can teleport to the position of your cursor. It means that you can move around quite quickly. But first of all, I think most importantly, it means that if you fall... Oh no, I'm dead here. I mean, I could grab on football, but oh no, I'm dead here. Hold, like, you can pause the game and then press V to teleport yourself. So you think you're falling down, just don't. And why is that useful? Well, if you are in a difficult region, like Underhang, if I stay in the shelter right here, I got a passage. I have to wait a little bit here. Okay, so what I like to use DevTools for, let's say that I want to practice Underhang. I can do this fold. Do all the movement here. Yeah, I missed that. Rivulet guide, yes. Hello, Iced. I recommend that you watch the rest, the whole VOD after the stream is over, and whenever you have time. Because I explain pretty much everything that there is about this run, if you want to know anything. So, this is why I have Beastmaster enabled, because you can spawn in a grapple worm here. Because of another mod that I have enabled will prevent creatures from spawning. So, you can use Beastmaster to... Oops, I messed that up. To spawn in a grapple worm for these rooms specifically. Hello? Have I forgotten how to do this? I think I have. It has been a while since I've actually done this run. I'm up here. There we go. So for this area, this is why I like to have DevTools enabled. Whoops. I can mess up if you have some of the buttons bound incorrectly. Let's say that I'm practicing this area. I just want to do the movement, you know. And then, uh-oh, I've fallen. I made a mistake. Turn DevTools, teleport yourself back up. And then you can practice this little bit and make sure that you're really good at doing it consistently. so you don't make that mistake again. Because it'd be annoying to have to restart a whole bunch and like go all the way back to the shelter and do the beginning every time just because you make a simple mistake. It also could save you from DLLs. So let's say I get grabbed by a DLL here. Oh no, help yourself out. Practice this again. And I like to have dev tools enabled for this whole thing when you're practicing. Obviously, it's not allowed in an actual run. If you ever make a mistake, fall down, help yourself back up, and then just practice over and over again. And if you want, even if you're not making a mistake, if you want to really practice a specific room, you can try to go through the whole thing, and then just teleport yourself back to the beginning to repeat it. This way you can really like ingrain these movements in your head. So I really like to have dev tools enabled just for any area that you want to practice repeatedly. And the next mod that I want to talk about is this one right here, Game Journalist. Now, this is kind of a funny mod, but it gets rid of creatures. Any creature that spawns from a den, some creatures are excluded from this, and they will show up anyway, but any creature that spawns from a den will be removed by this mod. And yeah, it makes the game a lot easier. If you're just playing the game casually, don't use this mod. Creatures are an important part of the game. But if you're practicing speedruns, I really like having this mod, because it means that you can practice the movement of a run without having to worry about the RNG of creatures. So you can practice the whole route without creatures getting in the way to really get used to the movement, so that you can actually do a full run. Because, you know, when you're dealing with creatures, it can, you know, you're probably going to die like 80% of the time to some random lizards, right? So if you disable all the creatures, you have a decent chance of actually doing the whole run. And maybe you can even use dev tools so that you don't like die to underhang or something. But just practicing a full run a whole lot and not having to worry about creatures getting in the way of that, it can really like help out with practicing. I actually like kind of lost motivation to do speedrunning because of how difficult this run is and how many times I died to lizards. But this mod is why I continue to do the speedrunning, and when I actually got the world record. Just being able to practice a full run, all the movement, multiple times in a row, and not just like dying in the drainage system and Chimney Canopy over and over again. You know, it means that you can actually like use the movement. And like if I also know that you have to restart a new save file, or not a save file, a new game to disable creatures properly. So another little tip that I have: if you want to practice a specific segment, you can use dev tools to. Whoops, it's up here. Like, oh no, actually I don't have enough karma for this gate, but if you had 3 karma, you could enter this side of the gate, so you don't have to spend as much time farming. But let's just get ourselves over here. So this is why I like having dev tools on. It means that I can, when I'm practicing, I don't have to spend too much time like karma catching. And like, there we go. We have enough karma now. And this right here is the problem. You have to wait a little bit for the next region to load in. But I've gotten to get right. I want to practice the segment specifically, so I can just use dev tools to get myself here real quick. And I won't have to deal with lizards, so this whole segment is not going to be lizards getting in the way. And let's say that I want to practice the plank, right? Well, now there's not going to be any like random spiders or lizards like killing me while I'm attempting this, right? Like, this is an area where there's usually a lot of lizards that get in your way, but You know, I could just focus on like my movement, like climbing up the poles, getting really good at that. But of course, like when you actually do want to get around to doing attempts, when you actually want to do a speedrun, of course you're going to have to deal with creatures. So you do have to balance you have to like practice between like no creatures at all, so you can focus on the movement, and practicing with creatures so that you know like how to deal with them in an actual speedrun. Batflies aren't affected at all. Yeah, I'd super recommend having these mods enabled just for practicing, and honestly for any speedrun that you want to practice. I mean, of course, for some speedruns like Artificer or Spearmaster, like you're going to deal with creatures. You know, just disabling creatures at all is like completely unrealistic circumstances, because like Artificer is always going to have to be carrying scavengers, or you're always going to have to be fighting scavengers. So just always practice them with creatures enabled, right? But for Rivulets, there's a chance. Also, here's the throw boost. There you go. For Rivulets, you know, there's a chance that you don't find that creatures don't really get your way that much, which means that practicing without creatures at all is like somewhat realistic. You know, you're already going to be using the same kind of movement as in an actual run, but without the randomness of, you know, maybe I might randomly die to some lizard. That's where I'd like to use the Sentinels and Hop. Let me mess this all up. But, you know, since I'm practicing right now, like I wasn't happy with the way that I did that room. Just go back to the start and do it again. I also have the remix setting on that like extends the length of cycles, so you know I don't have to worry about being too fast. I can afford to, you know, spend a bit of time to like practice a specific room if I want to. Whoops. That's dev tools. Wow, crazy new tech discovered. So if you ever fall off the edge, pause the game, press V, and it'll tell you about your cursor, so that you can, you know, make sure that you don't make the same mistake of flinging yourself into space. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say for this stream. One thing, okay, the last thing that I want to mention specifically, the strategies that you decide to use for a speedrun depends on your goal. What do you want to, what is your like time, like what, you know, what is your goal for the speedrun, right? If you just want to, you know, put a time up on the leaderboards, you don't really care, or if you just want to like open up the game and beat the game quickly, you know, you're going to want to take the safer strategies. You know, take a few more shelters here. Don't go for the super risky movement. You know, you don't like be very slow when you're going through underhang. Because of course, if you spend like 10 attempts, like if it takes like 20 attempts to actually finish a run, then that's not beating the game very quickly, is it? If you want to go for like a low 30 time, you know, you're probably going to want to learn some of the like faster strategies, like, you know, trying to see if you can make it between the shelters in like a single cycle, for example. You should like start learning some of the more like risky strategies, but you know, whatever your goal is for the speedrun, learn that kind of movement. I think it's, you know, you should prioritize consistency over speed for the most part. Up until the point where you know that you need to go for the riskier strategies to improve your time. You know, it should only be up until that point when you want to go for that. You want to take those risks. But yeah, I think that is pretty much everything I have to say about this speedrun. I know the stream is a little bit shorter than others, but you know, hopefully this is, you know, I've kind of condensed everything into a digestible form. You know, if you really want to learn the speedrun, I don't want you to spend like forever trying to figure everything out. So hopefully, I'm currently in the process of doing a speedrun for every single downpour character. So I've already done Rivulet, I've already done Gourmand, and hopefully I can learn enough about the speedrun that I can make a guide stream like this, you know, explaining everything that I know about the speedrun, so that, you know, if anyone is interested in trying the speedrun out for themselves, you know, you can watch this video. If you see anyone who's interested, you can share this video with them, stream, VOD. I think I'm planning on adding some timestamps to the description to kind of organize some of the information in the video by region. Like if you are struggling with underhang, I create a timestamp for that. So yeah, hopefully I'll do a stream like this for every character eventually. Maybe not for Saints. I'll probably have to do 2 streams for that just because of how much longer the Saint run is. Oh, another thing that I want to mention, if you want to speedrun Rivulets, but you're not really a fan of the route that we take in story percent, like maybe you don't like using grapple worms or the refraction cell or going through pebbles, another option is to do the ascension route, where you meet a bunch of echoes to get enough karma to go to the depths and ascend. That's honestly a pretty fun speedrun, in my opinion. It's also a lot easier than the story percent run. So if you like Rivulets, but you don't like the story percent run, try that out. And that goes for any character. Look at the different categories and see which one that you might be interested in speedrunning. So yeah, that's going to be the end of the stream. Thanks everyone for watching. Yeah, see ya.